My name is Richard Löwenstein, and you're listening to the Scene World podcast.
It's the Scene World podcast. Yeah. I'm AJ. Joerg is right there. I'm pointing again like people can see me. I keep doing this.
Yeah. We should make it like a guessing game. Will be the next podcast video or audio only?
It is a guessing game for me because usually 10 minutes before we start, I say, is this audio or video?
But I tell you this every time we discuss our guests, and you never remember that.
Pay attention to anything in my life.
Nice. All right. So,
in just a sec, we're going to be talking to Jason Scott from archive.org. So that's going to be pretty cool. He's one we've been looking forward to for a while. So that's in just a little bit. We have a few pieces of news before we get to that, our obligatory news section. So.
Exactly. So let's start with Amiga 34 happened in Neuss, Germany.
Neuss.
Exactly. And there was also, among many other people, Mike Battlana, and he spoke a lot.
From Cloanto. This is Mike Battlana from Cloanto, who is one of the current disputed Amiga rights owners, and yeah.
Yeah. So he held a speech on the stage, and this speech received a summary of the speech from the amiga/news.de, and they also linked to a YouTube video where there is a recording, but I suggest to everybody activate the closed captions for the video because the audio quality is pretty bad. And there he spoke about the current situation of the Amiga rights.
Right, which is that I guess Cloanto has acquired most of it now.
Probably, yeah.
So you talked to him at Gamescom a bit.
I did it briefly, yes. I said, I'm happy that we are not part of this battle because fortunately we got an open source solution that works. We got actually support in putting the Amiga issues together from Rupert, who is the coder of the script Amiga emulator.
Right.
So, and I always forget the name of the OS that we are using as an alternative.
Isn't it Arrows?
Arrows, exactly.
Yeah. For reference, for the listeners that may not know, we currently have an Amiga version of the magazine. We want to put this online so that people can access it and watch, look at it within a web browser. And the issue that we had is that the rights for Amiga are spread everywhere. One company owns the rights to the Kickstart. Another company owns the rights to the Amiga OS software. Another person owns the rights to whatever. And finding some way to implement this in a web browser, which doesn't infringe on somebody's copyright it was a challenge, and it took us quite a long time to track down and figure out some way to do this.
Interestingly, we spoke to all parties, and all parties gave us permissions, but they also said, if something happens with that permission, then you might be sued by the other party instead.
Right. Yep.
So there was no way to be sure that we are not getting into trouble, despite we got an agreement from all sides that they are fine with giving us a license.
Right. So we found a way around it.
We discussed about this internally, and our Oliver 6, he had to modify the magazine system a bit, though it wouldn't crash, and support arrows. Mm-hmm. And and we are not the only one with the problem. Richard Löwenstein from Reshoot R is having the exact same issue, because he told me at Neuss that he wants to make his game compatible with the web browser version, and the game crashes for him, and he
Right.
has to change code in the game to make it not crashing on errors anymore.
Right.
So we are not the only ones having this issue.
Well, Aros isn't an exact. It's like a fork of Amiga OS, and it was the Amiga Research Operating System or something to that effect. And so it's similar, but it's not quite the same. So if you're gonna adapt your software for it, you have to modify it a little bit so that it works within the framework. Just the same as if you were trying to go from Amiga Kickstart 1.3 to 3.1 or whatever. There's a whole list of things you got to worry about.
And well, the good thing is we have nice people, knowledgeable people, and so we got this fixed.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
And Rupert Hausberger, who is the author of the scripted Amiga emulator, he helped us a lot.
Yeah.
And this is so great. Yeah.
So I've got one here from. There's been a conversion underway of Eye of the Beholder.
Wow!
I don't know if you do you know this game? It's a
of course.
Yeah. So this has been. It was on Amiga. It was on a couple of different platforms, but it never quite made the jump to the 64. And for a while, it was kind of. A lot of people thought that it was a little too technical and a little bit too that the 64 just wasn't up to the challenge. But Andreas Larsson is a developer that is working on this. This has been going on for quite a while. It's been about a year since we've heard anything. As of November 3rd, however, he said that he was on Twitch showing version 0.91 of the game. So it's still a beta, but he's testing it. He's trying to find some bugs, and there's some controls that are not there yet. But the game looks freaking amazing, and I mean, it looks. I almost want to jump to the statement that I've played it on the Amiga, and I actually think it looks nicer on the 64 than it did on the Amiga.
Well, there are a lot of games that were told to be impossible. The most prominent example would be Lemmings.
Really? Lemmings?
Yes, because of 100 sprites moving, impossible.
Yeah.
And even coding this thing on the C64 is impossible.
Yeah.
So what they did is actually there's a whole 3-parted diary from SAP 64 where the developers wrote how they did it, and they actually did it by connecting 2 Amigas in a little network.
Interesting.
And with the combined Amiga resources of 2 Amigas, they were able to develop Lemmings for the C64. So they created their own developing system.
Very interesting. We'll put a link to the beta testing, the live beta testing of Eye of the Beholder.
And to the Lemmings diary story, because it's so interesting to read.
And it looks really good, and it's even got like the soundtrack is there. I mean, everything looks really, really nice on it. So I am looking forward to seeing that come out.
And the interesting thing is, Lemmings is the last commercial game that was released in the mainstream market.
I know.
94. Oh my God.
Yeah.
And also the last game where Jeroen Tel did commercial music.
That's right.
For the Commodore 64.
That's right. I also want to point out there is currently on Kickstarter. There's a new Kickstarter. As of today, there's 29 days left in it. It is for an upgrade, a mechanical keyboard for the Amiga 500 or 600 or 1200. It is, who is this project by? I don't know, Micronics.
Never heard, but then I'm not big into
I haven't
Amiga.
either. Currently, as of this time, they're searching, they're looking for, their goal is 70,000 Australian dollars, which is about 48,000 American dollars. of that $70,000, they've raised about $8. So, but I mean, we're a day into it, so this is not unusual. But it does look interesting, and this will, if they can make this, if they can do it, it's going to give you standard Cherry MX compatible switches, standard keycaps for these switches, and it'll be a pretty big update over the Amiga keyboard, which Commodore keyboards are not fantastic, and especially
I love them.
It depends. I am a fan of the Commodore 128 keyboard. The Commodore 128 keyboard is beautiful to work with. The 64 keyboard I was never a fan of because it's like whereas typing on a 128 is a delicate waltz, typing on a C64 is road construction. It's
never had a problem with it.
It's it's very heavy, and you got to really
typewriter keyboard.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what it is.
He wanted.
That's exactly what it is. The Amiga had two different keyboards, from what I understand. One is a very 128-like keyboard with the springs and all that stuff, which is okay. The other one, which is the one that I have, is just it's got little rubber cups. And it does not feel as responsive as I would want it. And an upgrade to that, we've seen upgrades to the 64 and 128 keyboards. Lau Brex, yes, with his mech board 64, and there's other solutions for the Amiga. There's an add-on where you can plug in a USB keyboard or a wireless keyboard to it and use that. But to actually have like a mechanical real keyboard in the machine that is nice would be really neat, and I would enjoy that, and it would make typing on it much more fun than it has been for me.
Great.
So we'll put a link to that. Everyone should check that out if you're interested in it. You should back it. Right now, again, it's got 68 backers. We're at a small fraction of the actual goal, but again, it's only a day or two into it, so check it out. It ends on December 4th, and hopefully, maybe it'll be done. Maybe we should talk to those guys. That would be interesting, right?
Then I let you do the talking.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Yes.
I'm not a baby. Yeah. So anyway, other news. Paul Gardner-Stephen was actually a guest in the second Brotkastenfreunde podcast. Oh. And he got the chance to speak his German for once. Awesome. Which he always complained he isn't allowed to when he's talking to the team. Because they are English, despite they are based in Germany. But it's the same for us in Scene World. I always say the people... do it in English, even if the Germans do something.
Isn't Paul Australian, though?
Yeah. So, yeah. You can hear it.
Yeah.
But I couldn't understand it.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's cool. That's, from the Mega 65. I still love the Mega 65. We'll put a link to that podcast so everyone can listen to it. And I still,
Must have been 3 by now or something.
What's that?
Or 2 episodes. I think 2 episodes. Yeah, we did 2 episodes.
Yeah, we did an original. We did the interview with them originally, and then we did a follow up. I'd love to do another one. But you
maybe
just said
next year.
He was on a different podcast talking in German, so we'll put a link to that one where people can hear it. And
exactly,
and
maybe when they are closer to the release.
Yeah, and everybody that listens should probably send him an email saying that they should send me a Mega 65.
Send it to podcast@sceneworld.org because I want one too.
Yes.
So a little bit on the sad side, our contributor from the last issue, Hugo Lerara.
Hugo.
Yeah, also called Hillerner78. Unfortunately, died because of an accident.
Yes, on October 17th of 2019 this year, just a little bit ago.
Exactly. And I took an effort to collect all the info I could get from the Peruvian Amiga C64 Facebook group. Thanks for that. So I got photos from the last meeting that he allowed us to link to from the homepage. That's also part of the remembering page,
right,
of him. And and also I preserved a live stream that he posted on Facebook at the last meeting at his home in September.
Right.
That can all be found on his memorial page on 8bitlegends.com.
Yeah, and we'll put a link to that, of course, so that everyone can check it out. He was a good guy, and he was working on getting a scene party or gathering or something happening down in Peru. Yeah. Yeah,
he did it. He did it actually in March.
Yeah.
And then a small one at his home in September.
Right.
Unfortunately, he was in the process of getting a new running C64. He just got a new drive and all that stuff.
Yeah. So it's a big, it's a loss. It's definitely a loss for the scene in general, because, and especially for the South American, the scene, because, you know, there's not too many people in that part of the world that are really active as far as this silly thing that we do, you know. And and he was one of the
pushers,
big names, one of the really active people that was really into this and excited about it, and to lose him is kind of it's a big hit for that part of this part of the scene.
We actually spoke about that with Lobsang Alvitas in the third podcast we did, and we actually talked about the history of how that all happened to be and how things got inactive.
Right.
And back then we spoke about the possibility to make a meeting with all those guys again, and Hugo was actually the one that took over this idea and made it happen. So I hope there will somebody else from this Peruvian side of the scene and continue his efforts. That would be great.
Yeah, and of course our thoughts and you know, our condolences are with his family and friends.
Made me really sad.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's the way it happened to be.
It's sad when anybody passes, but you know, especially when they're and I didn't know the guy. I'd never spoken to him, but just from what I could tell from the interactions with the magazine and with what he's been doing, he was a good guy, and he was really he'll be missed. It's a sad day.
Yeah.
So,
which reminds me about that next year we are 20 years Scene World, and a lot of people that we interviewed and spoke to are already dead, unfortunately.
Yeah. So I've got a thing here about.
Oh, maybe we should mention one of our own news. We released recently a YouTube video with the Swiss developer for Amiga games. He worked on games for Starbite also, Roman Werner.
Yes.
And I think this is a really very nice interview, because he spoke about how the first Amiga virus happened to be, how it was working with the Germans, all the problems with conversions Atari games to the Amiga. And he is a great storyteller, and it goes in the same realms like Mike Clark, which is one of our most famous interviews, because Mike Clark is also a big storyteller from Psygnosis and all. And Roman Werner is also a very, very good storyteller here. So don't miss it. It's, of course, the shortcut URL is scene.world/Roman Werner.
Cool. Yep. And speaking of, you mentioned the Atari. Speaking of that, there's a guy here. It's okay.
Where?
No,
Here?
well, over here, over there, that way. His name is Tony P.
That sounds icky.
I guess what we're looking at is a replacement SID. It's called the ST SID. It's a board. It features stereo or dual SID, dual pin PWM, 5-bit plus 5. I don't know what I'm reading. MIDI in out. While it looks
which makes sense.
Yeah, I don't exactly know what I'm looking at. It looks like it's a replacement SID. He says, there's through holes, so you can actually stack another SID. It's an emulation of. It's a SID emulator
for the Atari.
No, I think it's for the 64. So yeah, it's another alternative to the SID. I mentioned Atari, but that might just be nonsense because it's not really. I'm guessing that it's. Where does it say what it's based on?
Do you want me to paste in waiting loop music?
Yeah, honestly, we should because it's not really explained very well. So it's a 16 megahertz STM8S003K3T with 8K of flash memory, 1K of RAM, and 120 bytes EEPROM. So it's an emulator for the SID. There's really not much. I don't see any demos of how it works. I don't see much about anything about it other than that the guy is selling it and it's there's no website for it. He posted on the Lemon forums about it, and that's about all there is. It's just, hey, you want to buy this thing? I'm making it. And
this is how the RM128 started.
Yeah, and he'll
with
be selling
posts
them
on Lemon.
Yeah,
64.
selling them at $29 once they're for sale. But there's no I can't put. There's nothing showing how well it emulates it or how well it sounds or what it sounds like at all.
Surprise!
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, so I don't know what else to say about that. Is that it's there, but I don't know how good it is, and I don't know what you do with it.
Do you remember the first SID replacements, the Swin SID, with the flying wires and the examples to download from Rob Hubbard's Formula One and so on? And everybody was like, wow, this sounds like bullshit. And now we're having SID replacements all over the place.
Yep.
And now nobody says, oh, it's bullshit. Now everybody says like, oh, I want one. How this whole perspective has changed.
Yeah. Yep.
Incredible.
Here's another one, which is really kind of cool. I don't know if I talked about this last time. I may have. Did we talk about the VIC-2 too?
No.
Or the VIC-2 squared, I guess, actually would be the...
Never heard of that.
So Perifractic from Retro Recipes has worked together with Sean Harrington, also known as One Stage, to build a board. It is called the VIC-2 2, or VIC-2 squared, the little tiny 2 next to the 2. And what this does is it allows you to switch your 64 between NTSC and PAL.
Nice.
You need an NTSC VIC-2 and a PAL and VIC-2. It only works. It's only been tested on certain revisions. It's got to be a long board, and there's certain revisions of long board that it works on. It hasn't been tested on others.
Well, that's sounding like something I would want. Because when I want NTSC, I have to go to my SX64 NTSC or swap my whole computer.
Yeah, and I feel like we were just talking about this not long ago, where we were...
Last year.
Yeah, where we were saying that it shouldn't be... It doesn't seem like it should be hard to switch, to kind of put something in there to switch your 64 from PAL to NTSC.
I did a very, very detailed blog post on my blog about it with an example video of how it's done.
Right. And that's...
So we can link to that.
Yes, and I did that with mine too. I converted my NTSC 64 to PAL and then back again because I didn't have a PAL screen to play it on, but the idea that there should be a way to kind of put a switch in that would allow you to kind of swap between the two seemed kind of a no-brainer to me, but no one had ever done it.
Shut up and take my money.
Yeah, exactly right. And now that one exists, although it's not for every revision of the machine. And
that doesn't matter. I have so many of
right.
them.
And from what I gather, I don't know if it's because it won't work on a short board or on a 64C, but I do know that it won't fit in the case of the 64C.
Well, that problem can be resolved also.
Exactly. So,
anyway, that's sounding totally like something I want to have.
Yes. It does seem really, really cool. And we'll link to the video where they put it together. And I don't know if it's for sale yet. I think it is. But yeah, so we'll put that in there so everyone can check that out.
For the grace of God.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, that's what I got. Have you got anything else?
I guess we are fine.
Okay. After we've edited out all our confusion and looking
with the names and
this
stuff,
this 30-minute intro will be like
8
minutes long. Yeah. So So having finished everything off, then Jason Scott is waiting over there. He's been diligently archiving things this whole time that we've been talking. And again, I'm very impressed that he hasn't been just throwing things at us and yelling it for taking too long. But
he has a lot of patience.
He is. He's very patient. So let's go and get into archiving.
I love archiving. So today we are speaking to Jason Scott in the podcast. Hello, Jason.
Why, hello there.
You are from archive.org.
Yeah, these days, that's how most people think of me.
And we also have as guest moderator here Martin Wisnowski, our guy from Cologne, and AJ, who everybody knows already, and of course me from Mannheim, Germany. So, Jason, let's start a bit. How did you actually start to get involved into computers and all that kinky stuff?
Oh, well, my father worked for IBM in the 1960s and 70s. And in the 1970s, they were experimenting with this whole home computer thing. Do we want to get into this business? And one of the side effects of that was that they brought a lot of home computers from other companies like Commodore and Atari and had them lying around. And once they looked at them, they were done with them. So my father would bring all of them home for me to try out. And I was like 8 or 9 at the time. And there are 3 of us, 3 kids of my father's. And I was the one who said, this is amazing. I've got to get in on this. So as soon as the actual IBM PC came out in the early 1980s, I got one from my father and also a modem. And that put me on the road to bulletin board systems, collecting software, programming. And then somewhere in my 20s was where I became a professional system administrator. Worked at a game company, and I also got involved in, all the consumer side where you're taking care of other people's machines for money until about 2010 when I got out of being a system administrator, still had my sanity, and an opportunity came up to work for the Internet Archive. And I started there in 2011, and I've been there ever since. So that's the light overview.
Yeah. So you mentioned bulletin board systems. You are actually known for having the largest or one of the largest web archives for bulletin board systems, textfiles.com.
Yes. Yeah, textfiles.com came around because when I was very young And on these bulletin board systems, I would be calling any number that was interesting, all of them. And the only thing that all of them had that I could guarantee would work on my machine were the text files. And people are quite forgiven for not being 100 years old and remembering this, but a lot of bulletin board systems had what were called general file sections, which were meant to be like, here's information on how to post to this board, or how to fix this modem, or how to cause trouble. And bulletin board system operators would, over time, change them into straight up, anarchy text files, hacking text files, cracking ideas. And I would collect them all because I found them all fascinating. So by the time I get to about 14 or 15, I've collected hundreds of these, and other people are giving them to me. And then I decided I would actually have my own bulletin board system, and I called it the Works BBS. And I said, we're text files only. And that got me about 2,000 of them. So I was collecting them at a time when I don't think it was occurring to people to collect them. So after I moved to Boston, another person took over the Works BBS, and even more text files came in. And then finally around 1998, I was looking up on these new search engines, bulletin board systems, and there was nothing about them. Like, it was weird. It was really weird how little there was about this important technology. And I said, somebody should put up a collection of these old files because they were amazing. And it ended up being me. And so from 1998 to now, it's the 21 years later, I've been running that site. And the world has progressively moved away from appreciating those files as pure, joyful historical files. To them, they're everything from devastatingly obscene to bizarre and violent. But to me, they were a part of, youth growing up online for the first time. And so I've kept them around, and textfiles.com still gets thousands of people visiting. I could not tell you why those people are connecting. Like, I don't know what their relationship to it is. And somewhere along the line, I made a documentary about bulletin boards. I got involved in additional computer history-like things. And once I got married to the Internet Archive's basically unlimited bandwidth and disk space, that was a match made in hell. And so now the amount of material that I'm bringing in or helping people bring in, is equivalent to 4 or 5 textfile.coms a day. And so it's grown. So I'm like, I've always had a fascination with kind of the way people act online and the character and vision we put forward with it. Like, how do we build our online persona, and the idea that you can craft everything associated with yourself onto these online worlds. And thematically, I've kept up with that all these years. It's worked out pretty well. I'm 50 now, so it's been all my life.
You even made a documentary film about it.
Yeah, in 2000. Okay, so the way that it came about is actually kind of interesting to people, especially we're talking about scene people. Like, the scene has done an incredible job now of chronicling a whole bunch of historical aspects in a way that really inspires me. And I think there's not enough cross-pollination between how that's happening and other subcultures, I would say, that would really benefit from thinking of it this way. I mean, the fact that you can say, I want to see the handwritten letters sent between these two pirate groups that led to this party, of which we have all these pictures from the party and all these flyers from the party, at which there were these attendees, and you can look up these attendees and see what productions they were involved in. Like, very few subcultures take the time to do that, and it ends up becoming a very simplified. People like narratives that are single thread. If we don't have that information, you know what I mean? Like we need to have something where someone goes, oh, first a guy named Joerg found the Amiga, and then he wrote a tracker, and then he met, Bill Stein, and he wrote a tracker together, and that's how trackers are, because they kind of can't handle there being so many participants. So when I had all of these text files up on a site, and it was by that point 50,000 text files, I realized many of them listed bulletin board systems by phone number in the US, along with text files that had call my BBS. So there were all of these traces of these bulletin boards, and for somebody who works in databases, the fact that there was an identifiable, unique quote unquote serial number, the phone number, that could let you know that, like, the airplane hangar and IPX Intranet Services both had the same phone number, which tells you it was the same people. This was like a fun weekend project. So I wrote kind of the biggest BBS list ever. And I think within the first week I had 50,000 listed. And it's gone up to I want to say 180,000. And so it just compiles all of these numbers. And then I put it up, and it got on Slashdot. And what I didn't expect was it started to function as a honeypot for all these folks who had been, involved in bulletin board systems. Like, you look up your name, and suddenly somewhere there's this pantheon of gods listing all of the bulletin boards that were in your area code, and all these names you haven't forgotten, but you haven't seen in 20 years. And they would write me 9-paragraph stories about, oh, somebody remembers me. Here's everything you need to know about my life. And I was getting dozens and dozens and dozens of these. And at some point, you say to yourself, all right, well, there's a movie here. These folks should be talked to one way or another. And so since I had a film degree and I had always wanted to actually use it in some way to do films, I set off to do a documentary. So the reason my documentary is weird to people is because it's 7 episodes. It's 5.5 hours long, and it interviews 250 people, because I was like, nobody's done a bulletin board system documentary in 2000. I guess I'm going to do the last one. And so I really made it as if this is it. This is the last chance we'll have. And, since I've done that documentary, 14 of those interviewees have died. I haven't seen other bulletin board system documentaries take up any of the slack. So I'm really glad I chose to do it. It was very long and it was expensive, but it was fun. It was great to meet there's something about meeting your heroes. I'm sure you guys get this.
Yes.
Where a name becomes a voice, and you're like, oh man, the guy who made Sea Dragon, he's really friendly. It's such a joy. It lets you get over all the rest of it, because you're like, I got to spend time with Bill Budge and Scott Adams and people from Infocom, and being able to meet folks that were just names on a screen works for both, scene people, and works for game makers and everything else.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. HA is from the American demo scene or user scene for the C64, and Martin is actually our graphic guy in the team. And next year we are actually doing those interviews and all that stuff since 20 years. And exactly as you say, some people already died that I interviewed 20 years ago. So I can totally relate to that.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of technology now to enable you to bring people back. You can really work well with old video and old audio recordings. And it's nice when you find out that somebody just speculatively, without any idea what they were going to do with it, put up old interviews. Here's a WAV file of a cassette tape from when I talked to a couple guys back in 94. I just left the, recorder going. And we can do stuff with that now. We have really good technology to make really fascinating work of all that audio. So for me, I'm happy that people are focusing on it. And every once in a while, I guess we'll get into this at some point, every once in a while someone goes, hey, bulletin board system documentary guy, you should do a demo scene documentary. And I'm like, no. No. And there's some fun reasons why no. But I appreciate, even though I know I'm not going to do it, I both appreciate the compliment that people think I should do it, and also that people recognize that there's a story there, because that's the first step to saving things, is somebody wakes up and says, you know what, I'm not going to throw these out. I'm going to put this into a box. I'm going to put these floppies in a box. I'm going to put these notices in a box. I'm going to put this newsletter in a box because I think it's got some purpose. And then, you know, I've been at the other end of this a lot lately, but people will call me and say, I have 500 of this thing. Do you want it? I've been sitting on it for 15 years. And I'll be like, yeah, we'll handle it. Like, it's great. People want to know that the thing that they kept in their garage or their attic or their parents' house, somebody is like, yeah, thanks, man. We would have never had that. And, you know, I appreciate that. And I encourage it from people out there. If there's something you're a part of, like, keep it in a box. Just label it as old crap and leave it. And I promise you, some young punks in 2030 are going to thank you for just not doing anything, you know, basically sitting with stuff in a pile.
Well, so I guess since you talk so much about the demo scene and you seem to be so much involved into it, when we wrote to archive.org that we want to interview guys, you must have had some reaction like, wow, scene world. I don't know.
So let's pull that back. Okay, so in the demo scene, my name is Sketch the Cow or Jason Scott, depending on, you know, where you're on. As Sketch the Cow, I did a bunch of Fast Tracker mods back in the 1990s. I was pals with Euphoria, although we never met, and a few other people. I knew the Hornet guys, obviously. And I went to NAID 96, and I went to Pilgrimage, a couple years of Pilgrimage in the U.S. I've also been to Synchrony, and there's the one Demo Splash and At Party. And I think that's my entire demo party. Nope. I also caused a lot of trouble over at Envy Scene. I think that's and I ran a demo party. You always forget yourself, right? So I ran a demo party, block party, in the middle of the country. So that's kind of like where I've dabbled. And then I had first heard about demos in 1987, 88, when I was lended an Amiga from, of all weird people, Andy Rubin, the creator of Android, who was a friend back then. And he lent me the machine because his company had done some video production work with the Amiga and it was lying around. He said, do you want to borrow it? And I said, sure. And I was really loving this Amiga, and then found out about demos. And so I thought these were just absolutely magical. And so throughout the, 87 to like 92 period, I was tracking down demos as best I could, wanted to go to these mythical demo parties, but I couldn't really get out to Europe. Let's see. And then started writing mods, then went to NAID. Then I kind of like collected a bunch of stuff and got involved with a few things like that through the mid 2000s. Spent way too much money on Block Party. Like, I spent a lot of money on Block Party, and it was fun. It was great to do it, but then kind of faded away from it and became once again kind of an end user. Kind of a person who every once in a while goes to Pouet, sees what the new hot ones are, and says, how are things, how are people doing and what's going on there? And then to a smaller extent, the Internet Archive has been both saving demos and, where I can, putting them up emulated at the archive so that you can play them, in your browser and experience them. And then, so that's kind of where I've been now, like a vague veteran, but let's not pretend. I want to make that clear for anyone who's listening, because you're right. The the demo scene creates, basically code and drama. I under no circumstance want to ever act like I am an expert, B, an important part of the scene, except for as one of multiple people who admire and respect capturing the artifacts for the joy of others and to chronicle. And that I, love it very much so, and love being there. I was really there was a demo party like thing at MagFest this past year, and I wandered into the suite where they were playing demos, and I just remember a really drunk guy walks up to me and puts his hand on my shoulder. He's like, okay. And he points at the screen and he's trying to explain to me that these are real time animations and sound and that these are demos. And I'm just like, you know what? I'm just going to soak in. I'm not going to correct this guy. I'm going to soak in this love. And it was like he was explaining a car or an incredible baseball game. He's like, you have to understand, he's back after a vacation. It's going to be amazing. And he was drunk and happy and wanted to share graphics with me. That to me was a joy, right? Like the fact that's kind of like, that's the beating heart at the bottom of all this. Once you introduce that many people and that much competition and the sense that some things are better done than others, you will inevitably get that weird kind of, from the peanut gallery would be the American way of putting it, but the idea that people are yelling like, you did it wrong, you're doing demos wrong. And that's just what happens when you pull all those people in. But of all the things they could be arguing about, the fact that that's what they chose, that tells me that the thing below it is really special. Yeah, so there you go. There's Jason Scott and the demo scene, and we can go in whatever direction you want with that.
Well, what I would like to know is, how did you make the jump to be the responsible for archiving at archive.org?
So when the Internet Archive, so it helps to understand that the Internet Archive is a massive improvisation by a rich guy. So,
I saw his presentation.
Yeah. So it helps to understand that, because sometimes you can get kind of hung up on, well, what did your committee decide? And Brewster, over time, if you look at everything we do, there's usually a story at the beginning of Brewster bumping into somebody at an event and waving his arms wildly, and next thing you know, they're involved in blank. That's kind of the way it goes. So, for instance, it was just books at the beginning, the books and the websites. And somewhere in the middle there, Brewster met up with a guy who was doing home, kind of keeping track of Grateful Dead live performances. And that led to us doing music and the Grateful Dead archive, and then a whole bunch of other music. That's kind of just how it happened. Same thing with movies. There was a guy named Rick Prelinger who was getting old government films. So we started hosting them in 2003, and that became how we do videos. And somewhere in there, he actually bumped into a guy named Simon Carless, who created a kind of mirror of the Two Cows system, so that there were, a few thousand shareware programs sitting on the archive, inert, just zip files in the description. Mm-hmm. And Simon did that for a while, but then he left. He went off and did a whole bunch of other things. He's one of the guys who runs GDC and Black Hat now. He's gone off to a great career. And the software collection lay dormant mostly from 2005 onward. And when Brewster hired me, they now call it Project Zero, but what it really is a hazing ritual where they give you an impossible task and then you go off and try to work on it. And based on how you feel after it, you stay or you go. And Brewster said, what would be really great if I think we really have fallen behind on software. we have it. We have a pile of stuff. Maybe you could do something about that. And maybe we could have something where we have virtual servers set up and people could play the programs. And I'm like, yeah, that's called VNC. It's also called emulation as a service now. And I'm like, that won't scale. We should put the emulator in the browser using JavaScript. And he was like, that's insane and will never work. But it does work.
Tell me about it. Tell us about it. I mean, Martin himself, he spent time getting the Amiga emulator to run.
Yeah.
Not running into law issues because nobody was giving us a license for the operating system and the workbench and all that crap. Oh my God. It took us half a year to figure out how it works because of all the technical thing and the law problems in the Amiga scene. Oh my God.
Absolutely. There was somebody who here's the problem. If you name any names in the Amiga scene, they're just going to send you lawyer letters. So let's not do that. Yeah. But the they don't need the defamation. But I think one of my friends really summarized it as the best. He said the Amiga industry from 1994 to the present day is 3 companies suing each other over the same $20,000.
Yeah.
That's basically what it is, right? And it's really unfortunate that you have this environment that affected so many people, and there is a belief that nobody should be able to run this historical stuff without paying a toll. And not every platform has its own personality quirks, the Mac people versus the Microsoft and so on. And I've dealt with some of them. I've spoken to some of them, some of their lawyers, some of them directly. Everybody has a different opinion on old software as to its viability and so on. And I think part of the biggest problem is that the half-life of software is so brutally short. Like, we have proof on the Apple II side that there were programs written for the Apple II Plus that absolutely couldn't run on the Apple IIe, but nobody checked or cared because the program was done, right? After 1983, who cares?
Right.
And here we are trying 20 years later to make it work. And we're having to go in. I mean, people are doing binary changes, and so you kind of complicate that with the fact that there are a number of titles that still, in defiance of everything, still have a viable product life. And by that I'm thinking about things like Doom or Boulder Dash, or even things as obscure as like Drug Wars or Pimp Wars. And there are these programs that have persisted, Oregon Trail, which have persisted up to the modern era. Mm-hmm. But then there's literally a million other titles that have no hope of any commercial exploitation, that have no future. And if we didn't make an effort and hope for forgiveness, or the way I put it, ask for probation instead of permission. If you didn't move this way, it would just disappear. Like, there'd be no way to pull it back. And it's sticky. So, yeah, the Amiga and the Commodore 64 emulation on the archive. Oh, yeah, not everybody is pleased, but pretty much everybody is pleased.
Well, even the 64, the ROMs from that have recently been claimed. So even when they did the 64 Reloaded, you're not allowed to include any of the ROMs with it. You have to get your own because someone decided that they own it.
So I'm not fully authorized to discuss legal everything, but I will tell you that if you fundamentally look at a lot of these conflicts, a lot of the conflicts arise over money changing hands. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's one thing you can argue about whether or not. And what will happen is that some of these firms whose job is to make an old program play again, but they haven't done all of their diligence, but they're still selling the program, they will try to paint a picture that everybody is affected by it. Again, I'm being really general here. So let's say somebody takes King's Quest and basically recreates it on a phone, an Android phone, and they load it into the Google Play Store, and they're selling it for $19.99. And some long dormant company comes along and says, "Hey, King's Quest, that's ours." The people who made that $19 Android port that they didn't talk to anybody about might try to paint it as, whoa, they're trying to kill history. But they've got a specific dog in that fight, right? They've got and they're another party. They're another faction. Like if you look at like a lot of the companies that get in trouble, you'll find out like websites will go down. And you're like, yeah, but that website was charging like $20 a month for a quote unquote membership. Mm-hmm. Like that's a very specific thing. We're a nonprofit. We're a library. We get takedowns all the time. We comply with the takedowns. We deal with it. And the fact is it will not be a big surprise to people to know that Capcom doesn't want people to play Street Fighter for free, that Atari does not want people to play Asteroids for free. And yet there will be, bizarre one-off shareware programs that came out in 1983 and nobody cares. Similarly, with the Commodore, there are all these really obscure packages that were cool and were really an indication of pushing things that have no future. And so they're up. Nobody checks on them. But every once in a while, there'll be some package. The company that owns Epix, for example, who own Jumpman and Winter Games, they're still active. They're a Bible software company, to give you an idea. And so they'll be like, take down Winter Games. And it's like, okay, I'll have to console myself with the other 70,000 titles. And so like, it's unfortunate that we're in this hybrid world. And I'm happy to be one of the troublemakers and get yelled at. I'm happy to be that person. A lot of institutions are very scared. They live in constant fear. And so part of the job from 2012 onwards was to indicate, first of all, that emulation was a valid discipline and staging of old software. And I think we've pretty much done that. Like nobody really freaks out that there's emulation in the browser now. It's so mundane. And I love that. Great. Fantastic. And then from there, you find out like, oh yeah, there's a handful of packages that people are still selling and they're reissuing. Okay, great. But there's like a million demos and there's a million old mods and there's a million old writings that, we're happy to host. And we're happy to make available. And the amount of times it's run into trouble is vanishingly small. But I don't recommend anybody. I mean, like, here's the thing. Fundamentally, if you do anything on the internet that gets any amount of attention, you are in a special kind of hell. Like that's just a fact, right? Like that's it. That's just the nature of it. And if you talk to somebody and you say to someone, "Hey, you've really been, like you're really getting famous for the thing. How has the troublemakers been?" You'll see the light go out of their eyes, and they'll be like, "Oh, you mean like Barry? Yeah, Barry."
Tell me about it.
And that's just. But I think to me, that's just the nature of the game. I think that people who were stage or music performers or celebrities or anything from the last 100 years had the same problem. We just didn't have the feedback loop. Like, I think that if you had Frank Sinatra even like performing on television in the 60s and there was some way for some idiot to use a typewriter and have it show up on the video screen underneath him singing, it would be full of ridiculous idiots. Like that's the nature of it. We've given everybody this platform. We've added no social controls. So everybody gets to go from 0 to 100. And some of them think they're helping. And the feedback loop implies they're helping because people will write because they like trouble. There's no reason why, right? I mean, I go to bed every night very happy. And I enjoy what gets done. And I love doing fun experiments. There's a collection on the archive of something called the Ultimate Tape Archive, This is from like a couple years back. There's a number of people who have been turning old C64 tapes into .wav files.
Yeah.
And
I did
digitizing
that too for some. Yeah.
Oh, it's glorious. And they're digitizing the cassette tape front and the packaging, right? So I put them all up on the archive and they load in real time. So you can go here and you can sit for 14 minutes while it boots up a Pac-Man game, right? And
it's wonderful.
So like the thing is it's interesting in a roundabout sense, I suppose, to watch how these different companies dealt with that. Like our product takes 14 minutes to load. What do? And some of them would add like little graphic interstitials or have music.
Yeah.
And
or little games to play. Yeah.
And that would all go away if we didn't take this effort. Like people would just go, here's the program.
Fraction of a second, it's loaded.
Perhaps,
enjoy.
Right.
Yeah.
And perhaps even worse, it would just end up as a YouTube video. Like we watch a video of someone playing it and go like, I know about that game. Look what the video says.
Yeah. Well, some YouTubers make money with that.
We've seen games that have been re-released and whatnot where it misses. There's no more loading now, and you lose the intros a lot of times. I got an actual physical copy of an old EA game, Skate or Die, and I put it in my old computer, and I totally forgot that the Electronic Arts logo would pop up on screen and like change colors as it loaded. And
that's actually the moment where it checks for the copy protection.
Right. And it had totally, that had fallen out of my brain so many years ago because you don't see it on the emulators because you just jumped right to the game or because most of the stuff that you find, for the emulators are pirated or we're not the original version of the game because of the copy protection. So yeah, a lot of that stuff does get lost if it isn't put somewhere.
Yeah, there's a program, or I should say an effort. Okay, so I know you guys are like on the Commodore side. So on the Apple II side, there has been, you're everywhere, but there's, on the Apple II side, there's been some real huge advancements in the past 3 or 4 years. There's a new Flux reader that's really powerful. There are some really talented folks, and we're reaching out to a lot of dormant archives. Not dissimilar to the Amiga Sector 1 kind of stuff where somebody has 4,000 floppies sitting that used to be a user group. And we're going through them. And I launched into something called Project Everything. And that's where we're just trying to catalog every Apple II commercial product that ever came out. And we're using this as like here's this advantage we have. A lot of folks are paying attention, really talented folks. Really good at this are focusing on the programs. Where are the gaps? And it's actually rather shocking. I mean, not shocking to people who are in it anymore, but like there are programs that are canonical, like we think of that program for the Apple, like Choplifter or Hard Hat Mac. And you go, yeah, I played the cracked version. But one of the things that has come out is we have discovered cases where nobody played the real version. Like there's no copy of the real version out there. We are literally getting a box where someone goes, yeah, Hard Hat Mac, I've heard of it. It's like, yeah, but nobody ever flux imaged this original disc because they thought we had it. We didn't have it. So we're missing title screens. We're missing gameplay. We're missing loading because they've all been modified. And the Apple II and the Commodore, I would say right now, have probably the top quality amount of human effort behind them to gather their history. Like to really
relate to that. Yeah.
So when people get hung up on the shortcomings, I'm like, the Tandy people would kill to have your shortcomings. Like there are certainly some where you're like, man, nobody has this. And we're focusing, like I said, there's some copy protection schemes for the Apple II that turned out to be incompatible outside of the machine itself, like the Apple versus the Apple II Plus versus the Apple IIe. Like each one had its own problems even back then under ideal conditions using magnetic fluxed original copies. So what this comes down to is not getting overworked about the idea that we haven't gotten everything or it's not perfect, because it's determined that even if you're literally putting people who helped design Google Chromium behind like fixing up Apple II cracking software, you're still getting shortcomings. You're still missing stuff. It's an infinite field. Instead, really appreciate the great stuff we have. The fact that you can, I discovered this with Puet even, right? The amount of Puet links that depend on Dropbox or Google Drive links, and they're going to disappear.
Yeah.
And people are going to have to re-find them again. That's just that. I understand it at the time. Dropbox, really easy to use. Go for it. But then they disappear. Yeah. And that's with a group that you have to look at as saying they are aggressively, obsessively trying to chronicle this history. They're still falling short. That's just the nature of this game.
I actually would like to take this to the next question, because I actually was planning to ask you about it, because I saw a lot of presentations from Brewster and from you, and your presentations, at least those that I saw on eBay, are epic. For example, one where you explained how you fooled the agent detection of Google of Yahoo Homestead, and to be able to download all the archive when they announced they would shut down Google. I think it was Yahoo GeoCities.
Yeah.
And you said like there was a limit of 200 megabyte, and you had to find a way around the cutoff, and then you kind of modified the agent client to actually present to Yahoo like you are Google or something. And I think this was an amazing story.
Not the Google bot. So all right, so what you're getting into there is the way that I first got Brewster's attention was I had started a activist archiving group in the late 2000s. And the reason I did that was because it was a recognition by myself and a few others who I hung out with that there were all of these user-created communities in the 1990s that had been bought and sold in around the 2000 era, and then used kind of as almost like advertising pits for the next 8 to 10 years, followed by the company saying, you know what, we're going to get rid of this. We'll give you a free membership to our new service. We'll give you and they're like, they were as close to established old online communities as one could get. GeoCities is a common one that people know, but there have been literally dozens. And, they linger on for a while. And then over time, people age out or it ends. And then suddenly this stuff disappears. And for a lot of what was happening, the narrative was, well, it was fun. Bye-bye. And we were taking the attitude of somebody should make a coordinated attempt to gather as much of this data as possible and store it off so that the conversation doesn't end as soon as the site goes down. And I said there should be a team of archivists, archive team, and a team that launches in. And that was enough to get, a few dozen people involved and then a few hundred people involved. And the archive team has now been around for 10 years. And it's been collecting. It's doing it right now. Like as we speak, there's probably 5 to 10 open projects where they are recognizing things that are at risk and nobody's paying attention to them. And it would be terrible if they went away. And they're archiving them and then putting them up. And in some cases, the companies have been resistant to being downloaded. And we've had to do all sorts of tricks and misrepresent ourselves as Google and cut between 100 different IP addresses. And other times the companies are just lost, like they don't even know what's going on. And of course, every once in a while, an opportunity comes up where I get my hands on some old data. So, for instance, the most recent one was MySpace, quote unquote, lost all that data.
Yeah.
And it turned out a number of people had done academic studies in the late 2000s and had terabytes of music. So we put it all back up again to varying degrees of success. Same thing with the Internet Underground Music Archive, which got shut down with about a month of warning in 2008. And so in 2011, I put it all back up again. Of the 43,000 bands we put up, I would say like 300 were not happy, but the vast majority were happy. And, you know, people are like, why are they unhappy? I'm like, well, sometimes it was the weird, terrible demo version of an album they later sold. Other times somebody is in some disgusting punk band and then now he's an accountant with 3 kids. And so he's like, could you please take my name off the Bone Riders LP? But on the whole, it was, you know, most people were like, oh my God, you know, I mean, here's my collaborator who died and his family hated that he was a musician. So they threw all his stuff out and you guys have the only copies. That's fantastic, or whatever, you know, like, oh, my dad died. And this is music he did before he got sick. That's fantastic. And so on. So it's been, I mean, that happens a lot, right? If you're in the business of taking a lot of old things, holding them and making them available in the same way I said, you know, if you're public and big on the internet, you're going to get troublemakers. In the same way, there will always be people who appreciate coming back into contact with material that they were told and believed it was completely lost. So that's kind of been my bailiwick for the past, 9 years at the archive, has been helping people come back into contact with community and culture that they're told is worthless or not available or not around. With Archive Team, we've always had a little bit of a cranky pirate flag feel to it. But, on the whole, we're doing a valid, important thing. And, my presentations tend to be a little more rambunctious than Brewster's. And he's always thought that was kind of odd how I do my weird.
I still like both of you. I know when Brewsters were like, oh, we have decentralized our homepage, our web stuff, so you can even watch it from China where most stuff is blocked, or Iran or something. And then he was making a live demonstration, and he was as happy as a child that even in those countries, you can still access archive.org, even if it's slower than normal. But
Brewster has a whimsical spirit about him that really belies the fact that he's 59 years old. Like, he really loves weird toys. And it didn't take me that long to figure out, working for him, that as long as he didn't have to pay a lot of speculative money, like as long as he didn't have to pay $250,000 for 10 people to possibly work on it for a year, and I just would show him something people were working on, and we just had to make a few small changes to hook it in. He loved that. So that's how we ended up with the Winamp player at the Internet Archive. So if there's an audio item and you click on the llama in the right side of the screen, it will turn into a JavaScript implementation of the Winamp player, because he thought that was neat. And that's somebody else's pet project for like 5 years. But we put it up, and it was just a beloved thing.
I have a question. How do you make the decision to what to work on at the archive.org? So how do you organize the project, or how do you make the decision? Let's look at this stuff. This might be interesting. How's the process going on there?
Okay, so there's a couple layers to that, of course. So the Internet Archive itself is run by Brewster, who's kind of like the head idea man in charge. So his priorities are the archive's priorities. I'll give you an example. We have one of the largest online collections of 78 RPM records. And the reason for that is because he's like, I sure do love 78 RPM records. So we're digitizing them. We've put up over 250,000. And so we're, that's a thing. So now we have lots of it. He knows the Wayback is an incredibly important tool, and he's always thinking of ways to improve it. So that's why the Wayback has such a prominent place. And then after that, we do book scanning, we do adding stuff given to us by partner organizations. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm thinking of like the Library of Congress or places like Boston's Public Library or New York's Public Library, where they're working with us either to digitize materials that are only in their collections and then make it available through them, or we're helping them archive their websites to guarantee their presence is searchable. So like there's a lot of that froth going around. My particular area, though, is my title at the Internet Archive is Free Range Archivist, and I think in other situations it would be called like Coordinator of Special Projects. And that generally means, and I think this is very important, I talk about this, so a personality-oriented collective like the Archive can lead to a problem when the person doesn't care about the thing. And so like if there's somebody brings up like we should be doing this and the person goes nah, and that's the end of it, right? Like there's no whatever. But on multiple occasions Brewster has taken his basic take with a lot of my projects has been, if it doesn't really cost us any money, like, and by that he means hiring people, having to do management, having to, spend a lot of money on licenses and a bunch of other things, go for it. Let's see what happens on the other end. Like, go for it, and then we'll decide how it is. He considers, and when I say that calculation, I'll be clear. He means bandwidth and disks are free, and the reason why is because we're doing that anyway. Like, at this current moment, we have 2 petabytes of free disk space that we're filling. Like, that's our latest disk buy. So, okay, if you're going to spend a couple hundred gigs or, a terabyte or maybe 5 terabytes on this project, go ahead. What is it? And I'll be like, hip hop music mixtapes. They'll be like, okay, how's that go? And I go, well, there's these places, they're making them available. It looks out to be about 6,000 tapes. Each one's about, 100 megs. And I'll just be like, trust me, people want this. And he'll go, oh, great. And so suddenly we have this huge hip-hop mixtape archive that gets hundreds of thousands of people visiting it. And he can, at the end of the day, go, I'm brilliant. Look at this great idea I came up with. But it's mostly him saying, yeah, okay, what could it be? And that was the same way he took about software, or when I put up, there was like rave music from a lot of places, old zines, anything where it's like, oh, here's PDFs of camping magazines from the 50s. And he'll be like, okay, well, let's see what that looks like. And it'll turn out to have this group who's like, oh, we never could put all of them up before because nobody could afford the bandwidth and nobody could spend, nobody could add a reader. We do all that. So that very minor but critical management technique of I don't need to have everything go across my desk and sign it off. Go ahead and do it. Experiment with it. Has caused me to do things like put up console-based demos, demo scene pictures, old weird VHS tapes, unusual rave tapes, everything. Because he's like, okay. Because I happen to believe the future for us is ephemera. All the parts that like there's always going to be companies who will like do these massive negotiation routines and buy the back catalog of Random House and then make them available for $5.99 a month subscription fee, and you can read 50,000 books or whatever. But nobody is scanning old placemats or tractor manuals or recordings of speeches given at conferences nobody cares about 50 years later except they're hilarious. Like, do that. And so he's been like, yeah, okay. And every once in a while it hits. So in this way, it's been a good partnership. So there you go.
Actually, I have a question about it because some weeks ago, I was interviewing Birgit Lechtermann, who is one of the pioneers in making the first computer shows for youngsters in the 80s here in Germany. And she told me she got a cellar full of VHS tapes and music tapes with her radio and TV shows. all about the computer history, for the Commodore 64 and Amiga, and she is looking for somebody to archiving that, to go physically in her cellar, digging up those VHS tapes and converting it, and then storing it at some place. And when she heard that that we are going to interview you today, she wanted me to ask you if archive.org would actually be interested in helping that course and putting all that stuff online, because she knows that back in the day you did the same for the Computer Chronicles.
Sure. And so the answer to her and almost everyone else is there's usually 3 different ways to think of it. The first one is, I have a hard drive full of stuff. Help me get it somewhere. And I'll tell you, we can get that stuff up within a day or a couple days. Like, that'll be super easy.
In his case, in her case, somebody has to go to her cellar and physically digitize the VHS tapes first.
Right. And then so that's what I mean. So there's the second level. The second level is, I have all this content. It needs to be turned into that hard drive, and then maybe you'll take it. To which I can usually coordinate with people. Like, it'll turn out, you have to find, I don't know how interesting this is on a pure basis, but think of it as like every time you need to like rent a car or take off a plane, there's a whole checklist. So you go, okay, do you want the stuff back? Like, do you want the originals back? Do you have people who want to digitize it, but they have no place to put it, therefore they haven't set off and done it? Or do you have a hard drive and you just found no place? Each of those is like certain levels of ease or not ease, right? So I love it when people are like, I have 700 PDFs. Can you help me? And I'm like, yeah. The next one is, of course, is similar. Oh, I have, all these .avis. I just want to put them somewhere. Again, perfect. When somebody says like, I have X amount of tapes or X amount of books, I am all for digitizing those. It might be easier to find that there's somebody local who, if they're told we'll send them a hard drive, they rip the VHS tapes and then we put them on. We'll do all the rest of it for them. That might be the one final pebble that sends the avalanche. Like, oh, there's a guy who'll do it, but he has no place to put it. Well, we'll send you the hard drive. You don't have to spend money on the hard drive. We'll walk over with you. So my attitude is to like talk to people and then find out like where are their limits. I mean, now I don't mind giving people my address. It's jscott@archive.org, jscott@archive.org. People can always write to me. I always have a few tickets open.
Actually, you wrote me from your text files email address. So I don't know which one you prefer.
Well, I meant for people who are out there who are writing in. When I respond,
no,
it'll be text files.
Actually, she wants that you contact her media agency that represents her, because she is on television. She doesn't want her personal data out. So the way to contact her is to go through her media agency, and they will talk to you and make these things happen. So I would email you her contact data of her agency. Yeah. Well, that's how it is with people that are on television and so on.
Well,
they have this level of a crap filter when it comes to communication.
I will tell you. So the other two guys are immediately responding to this because the reason is, like I said, there's levels. There's levels. I get people who are like, I've got 200 tapes that I filmed at demo parties. And you go, great, let's make those live. Then I have people for whom they're like, well, we're thinking of doing a partnership with you where we see a media buy. And you're like, okay, well, this is never going to happen. But sure, let's go ahead. I'll certainly start that conversation, because usually somebody comes in there. I'm not saying this will be the case here, but eventually somebody will go, and what will your licensing fee be? And I'll be like, oh, no, that's not going to happen. But I'd rather that conversation get started, because maybe 5 years down the road, the person goes, yeah, look, just take the tapes. Just get him out of my house. And I'm totally for it. So
I will give you her contact data of her agency, and maybe you can figure something out. Because she stored it 30 years in her cellar just to make sure it doesn't get lost. She doesn't want to toss it away, but she wants it to be preserved for the future. And that is why she is keeping it, despite her family around is saying, like, get rid of it.
Yeah, I mean, at worst, and I've done this before, we actually have totally done this before, I think it helps to understand the scale. Last week, with very little warning, somebody in Oakland, California told us about his media collection, and there was stuff we wanted on it. And 3 days later, 14 pallets of material showed up at our warehouse. Okay, so that was last week. All right. Yeah. And that's like thousands and thousands of CDs, Blu-rays, videotapes, books. Like, we do that. We have a couple warehouses. Like, we're doing this. So I'm not afraid to talk to people, but it's always a case of, for some people, mentally, they just want to know there's a place they could choose to send it to, and then they bring it back to their family to go, see? I mean, I'm going to keep it and hoard it, and I'm not going to move with it. But I'm just saying, it goes all these different ways. I probably have 20 or 30 of these going at any given time, like various discussions. And sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't.
Well, I did have an interview with her for 1 hour. I guess if she wasn't interested about your computer journalism past, she wouldn't have done the interview in the first place. So, and she kept it for 30 years in her cellar. So I think she really wants to move forward to it, because she said she goes to places at Gamescom and other events, and youngsters who were never born in the 80s tell her, like, wow, this is interesting, you should put it up all on YouTube. You know? So I'm happy to start that conversation. I'm just telling you, I do this a lot. There's a lot out there, and I don't go into each one. I think it's unhealthy to go into each one like it's the last possible chance to get this information, because I think that just makes you over-excite everybody and get way too into it. But I'm happy to be, I mean, these conversations, I have them all the time, and I'm more than happy to be part of it. Great, thank you.
Maybe I have just another question. It's a little bit similar. It's just like how, as a community, or just like people doing stuff online, how could we help the culture to get more archived, or more just like, for example, the demo scene is pretty much self-documenting itself, so they have the awareness for this. And I've seen so many digital cultures just like vanished, just like what you already said. I did lots of net audio stuff, and all the websites are not online anymore, but archive.org has the MP3s. Can we as a culture, or as a people who make stuff online, for example, to help you, or as a culture to have this flying around?
Here's the thing. There's when you get any sort of a culture, it doesn't even have to be online. Those things usually have multiple layers to themselves. They have artifacts, things that are generated that represent part of that culture, whether it's newsletters, writings, songs, recordings of the jam session, message forum posts, and so on. Then you have the folks themselves, like the actual human meat, and it's a whole selection of stories and gossip and people. And then finally you have like kind of like the public face of it, like what represents this to other people. People who aren't in the subculture might have stuff about the subculture that you didn't even know was part of your deal, like newspaper articles or showing up on a thing or being discussed somewhere else. And everything that isn't self-evident needs a chronicler, needs somebody who maybe, and you always get this role from somebody who wants to be part of things, but maybe either doesn't have the talent for it or isn't comfortable being that. So you have all these people who do jam sessions every weekend at this place, and they're amazing. And there's a guy who goes and he listens to them. He can't jam, but he can run a tape recorder. And so he's just been recording them all these years, and he writes down who was at the jam session. So you know, like this guy was on horn and this guy was on keyboard. And at some point, that person has created a body of work about this culture that may be the main way it exists. And it's that critical moment where you hope they don't have a heart attack and nobody notices what this thing is, or that others haven't made duplicates of his work so that it's preserved. And that's when you step in, right? And so when you have a subculture that's based around online, the main advantage or the difference to all of this is that when it goes, if it's digital, it really goes. Like when a hard drive stops dead, that party is over. It's not like a sheaf of papers that you stuck into a manila envelope and forgot about. And you open them up 80 years later and you're like, this is interesting. Like it's gone. That's the main thing that adds a kind of real stress to it, along with the fact that it becomes harder and harder to get to that material over time. Like there might not be an export function, or there might not be some attempt to, convert it into a web archive, or it's behind a password protection and nobody's keeping a copy. There are some hybrid groups I deal with. There is a subclass or maybe a setting, what's a better word, a phylum of online community who want to have a hybrid public-private space. Like they want all the advantages of the internet, the interconnective tissue, the ease of transport, but they don't want it to be copied anywhere because they think of it as private. They're a nightmare. But everybody else, a lot of times, a good example would be You're the Man Now Dog, which was collecting all of this artwork, Flash-based artwork. And then over time, myself and others had archived copies of it because it was public facing, and they had grabbed it. And then one day, You're the Man Now Dog went under. Like the hard drive stopped working and the guy wasn't in the mood to deal with it. And so I announced, You're the archive now, dog, and, showed how you could get it to pretty much play at the archive. It's not perfect, but you could get like 85 to 90% of the experience. And that was just pure luck. If somebody is part of a culture and they're worried that like a lot of these layers are not being kept, they probably should be the chronicler. They probably should take on that interest, gather the stuff. I will tell people, my one hint to them is you don't have to make it perfect. It'd be nice if it was perfect, but I would hate for you to not do the work because you're scared. Like, and if I have to keep going back to that metaphor, like that you're scared you're putting the tape recorder in the wrong part of the room. Like, at least you put a tape recorder in the room, in the same way that like you're gathering up a whole bunch of material. Like maybe you're not doing it perfect. Maybe you haven't put it into a format that's perfect, but you did it. And then later somebody writes code that says, yeah, every time this guy did this, he meant this. And then it's done. Like it's fixed. The problem's fixed. Yeah. I'm not too worried. But if you don't have that data, and so there's a lot of places out there, and I'm going to round out back again to what I said about the people. Just doing a Skype interview with some of the folks saying, hey, dude, can I just talk to you for an hour just about like what this thing is, and just talk to them and then have a bunch of WAV files? That is like super valuable, like, 5-10 years later.
Exactly. I can actually relate to that because in 2016 I decided to email archive.org and I wanted to ask, what can we do to have our stuff archived? Podcast interviews with tech pioneers that are 88 or even above 90, and I, to my surprise, I got a response, and I was told, if you want to have a collection page dedicated to you, you need to have at least 5 files of a type. So let's say, for example, 5 podcast episodes.
So it's 50.
50 history interviews. And And so when we had 50s together from the historical interviews of tech pioneers, and we have 50 podcast interviews, I actually wrote to archive.org, and we got those 2 collections, especially for Scene World. And I'm always surprised how supportive you guys were. When I had a problem or a question, I always got it fixed within a few hours. And it's actually amazing. It's amazing how easy it was to get a special collection at archive.org and to get it archived. And it's sad, as you said before, that many people don't even take the effort of emailing you and asking you, how can I help?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so I get it because if you work at the archive, you think everybody knows about the archive. That's what I ran into when I was first there. And the other thing I think is that we seem a lot bigger than we are. There's probably about 170 full-time employees of varying degrees around the world. But to give you an idea of how things are, I mean, I can, like, when you send mail into the archive, I know who gets it, and I know the 2 people that person forwards them to. And the 1 person on staff they forward it to if it's like a legal thing. And when you mail the Internet Archive and say anything about software, like you use the word software in there, like I have a bunch of old software, it just ends up in my mailbox. Like the person who's running the front is like, software, Jason. And and similarly, like, oh, here's a bunch of person wants to make a collection, give it to Jeff. Like it'll go to Jeff.
Jeff is the guy that I emailed with.
Exactly. So it's like me and Jeff sitting at a table. There's Jake, and so on. Like it's very small, and we have a lot of automation, and we do our best to deal with people who want to add stuff, and we try to reach out. But I'm one of the main people doing outreach, and there's only like 2 or 3 of us doing that kind of outreach. So I'm not surprised that not everyone knows this is a thing. But one of the reasons that I do my attention-grabbing presentations and my tweets that link to crazy stuff is to kind of put in people's minds that this all exists. And more than once, I've had someone go, yeah, I saw you did a tweet about, like, I'll give you an example. There's a guy right now in Chicago. He has recorded a lot of shows. He taped them enough that he's annoying to a lot of clubs. Like they think of him as the guy who taped everything. I found an article about him from 1994. So he's been at it for a while, right? He's got like 50,000 tapes.
Wow.
And I guess he did a podcast. He appeared on a podcast this past week where he's like, yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do with them. Okay, well, now I have gotten something like 25 Twitter DMs, emails, and now, if it went across the thing, a Skype message from a coworker going, do you know about this guy? Can you talk to him? So, like, that happens. Like, I'm kind of the catch-all for somebody has a bunch of stuff. They want it online, but they don't know what to do with it. It's at risk. Call Jason. And
wow,
it's scary sometimes because, like, on Reddit, someone will go, yeah, I have, like, I'm sitting on 500 floppies. What do I do with them? And someone will go, call Jason. Somebody will see that. They will message me, and I will show up, like, 3 minutes later going, yeah, what? You need something? Like it's like the scary presence now on the internet.
So that means when I wrote to you, when I wrote to archive.org that I want to interview guys, then Jeff were like, oh, these crazy guys that keep emailing me since 3 years. They want to talk to us. How about Jason? Is this how Jason. It went? You spoke about Seenwald on the coffee table or something?
Yeah, I'm sure that's how it went. I'm sure what happened is, now I work out of New York, and they tend to be in California. But yeah, essentially a mail comes in. Oh, someone wants to do an interview. A lot of times Brewster will do interviews. Let's put it this way. When Playboy wants to interview him for a 2-page spread, Brewster probably gets the interview. When Scene World Podcast wants to do a 1-hour podcast, probably goes to Jason. But, you know, like I'm one of the people that can be contacted. I mean, unless it was about books, then it might go to another guy named Chris. And so on. Like in other words, if it wasn't anywhere in my subject area, they would still find other people to talk to. But yeah, on the whole, it's like, here's this odd thing. Jason will do it. He'll give a semi-coherent interview. He'll tell people where to go. That's probably how it happened. But no, it wouldn't. It's certainly, let's put it this way. The volume of mail is such that I guarantee you we do not have a roundtable discussion of the inbox. Because the inbox is very, very huge. We'll probably get a couple hundred messages a day, which is why, you'll get, and I mean 100 real meaty messages like, hi, I work with the astronomical. Like, here's a good example of one that's up on the archive now. And I helped put it together. And I look at it and I'm like, okay, it's a Canadian group that records 24-hour recordings of birds in this one park in, I think it's in Montreal. And they put up the 24-hour recording, and then a member of their ornithological society listens to it, condenses it down to the individual birds that were heard, and then adds a second track of, and here's the best of the last 24 hours, and here's what birds we hear. And they've been uploading that for months, like just months of recordings of a park.
Wow.
And it's just there, along with all of their, newsletters and stuff. And we're like, okay. I was doing some deep diving in our audio collections, and I have discovered, to my great surprise, like this happened once, and I thought, that's odd, and now I found out it happens all the time. There are radio stations, especially in a lot of countries like Argentina, Brazil, Middle East, where they have show archives that you can go to on their site, but they're all archive.org.
Yeah.
Like, they're uploading them to us and then linking to them. And they're just sitting around. And I've written stuff to condense them into collections. And I'll be like, this person has uploaded 1,800 shows because it'll be the last 6 years of this radio station. Like, all their shows and interviews. And I created these collections out of thin air. And when the first time it happened, I thought, well, that's pretty unique and weird. I'm up to 100, like 100 radio stations that depend on us randomly in the U.S. to hold all of their archives. So, like, the archive gets between 2,500 and 3,000 new items a day. That's outside of people who we've arranged it with.
Right.
Like, that's just folks uploading to the open collections. 3,000 a day.
So that brings me to a question, which is that, like you mentioned earlier, that one of the main things that we can focus on is the ephemeral stuff, the things that aren't necessarily, from it's a band recording from a club when they were young and nobody remembers it, or it's a meeting at a boardroom that no one remembers 10 minutes after it happened, but we keep it. Where is that line drawn between what is worth being archived and what isn't?
I mean, I have my own philosophies, but I'm not necessarily the only person. I think, like, I'll give you an example. So there's a recordings approach, which I like in theory. And what it does is it records from a position on Earth all of the radio spectrum. Mm-hmm. And there's a program for this, and I'm totally forgetting what it is. Somebody out there just called it out at his podcast. But it basically records all radio spectrum, okay? And I think it works out to, I want to say like 10 or 20 megs a second. Whatever it is.
Right.
And there are then client programs that can take that file and literally tune it like a radio, like move it up and down and add squelch and be able to interpret it like it was an incoming radio signal. Mm-hmm. That's amazing. And the idea in your mind of, well, why don't we just record all the radio spectrum, and then later we go back and we're able to see what was happening on that day. And that's amazing. That is an interesting idea. But it currently, with the current technology, doesn't scale because you're talking about literally terabytes a day.
Right.
So it's too much. It's too much for us. In the era of the petabyte hard drive, which is perhaps not too far off, probably in the next 5 to 10 years, probably earlier than that, when you can spend, whatever it is, $400 and have a petabyte of disk storage, then it makes sense. Sure. Go ahead. One drive a year. Awesome. But right now it doesn't make sense. It's too much. And yet there'll be stuff where somebody sends me, like VHS tape, and that's about 12 gigs an hour, I think, to get that. And I'm like, yeah, put it up. Whatever it is. Recordings of commercials, old news programs, weird old videotapes. Yeah, we'll put them up. We'll make them playable. That's neat. Some of them are garbage. Some of them aren't. Some of them are great. Some of them aren't. Some of them really are barely watchable. Other ones are fascinating. But at 12 gigabytes an hour, okay, I'll take it. I'll take it. And obviously with audio, where even under top quality conditions, you're talking maybe a gigabyte to get an hour. Fine. Great. So I think it's like that. It's like there's always going to be this layer of do you need 24 hours of CCTV footage in which the only thing that happens is that a guy walks by it once at 10 p.m. And do you want that to be there? As opposed to, does a guy do and again, I can hear you. Your brain starts to go into this theory. And you're like, well, maybe you won't know. And the answer is yes, you can do that. That's how hoarding happens. Mm-hmm. You never know. We might need these 400 makeup sponges for a rainy day.
Yeah, and it also goes into what is, considered important for doing that. I remember when I was younger, we rented a house, and I went up in the attic. The previous occupants had left photo negatives from the 60s and 70s. And I mean, this stuff was fascinating to me because it's like I'm looking into the lives of people that no longer exist or have moved far, far away and whatnot. And it's like, that's the kind of thing that I think well, what do I do with this? Is this something that is even worth? I mean, it's a snippet of time from something that is insignificant to almost everybody in the world, except for the people that were there at the time. And of course, this 15-year-old kid looking at it, me, and is that the kind of thing that the sort of little ephemeral recordings and images and writings and stuff like that don't really fit into society as a whole? It's not something that in 100 years someone might go, I wonder what the Tookers were doing in 1972.
I guess it's also a matter of perspective.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing, right? So we are one entity, and we have our own approaches, and so there are things that we are able to provide that others don't, in terms of being willing to take stuff and also making it playable and making it available, and that will work for a bunch. But the edge cases of that is that you will always find stuff where even we are like, come on, dude, and also stuff where we're like, oh, didn't think of it, but sure. It doesn't hurt us to have it, I guess. Right. We might give you advice, for instance, and this gets into kind of the presentation issue of the archive, which is we can read PDFs online. So on one level, let's say you have a run, and this happens a lot. We get a run of 15 issues of a obscure Amiga magazine that ran for 15 issues and died. What people tend to want to do is upload 15 magazines into one item. And then other people want to upload 15 individual items, one magazine. It's better for our presentation style for you to put it one per item. But I will also tell people, put it in a zip and make that an item as well for the people who want to download it directly, especially if it turns out there's additional material that doesn't fit into that reading. I love making a big, fat, honking zip file collection of a bunch of disparate stuff, and then making a collection that accompanies it and here you can read individual issues and look at things and play them. But this is all like bending the source material to the whim of the archive. I like having pristine, it came in, thank you very much, massive collection, and then kind of piecing out a playable version so that people in the contemporary space can enjoy it. But see this, and I think it's important to note that this is all inherent Internet Archive bias of the archive, the will of the archive, where a company an archive does or doesn't take something based on the height of their shelves, as opposed to whether or not it is objectively good. Right. And I think you're going to deal with that a lot. I think that if you have a bunch of material, different archives and different groups have different things they'll take. I think if something is important to somebody, it's important. I don't think that there's any situation where people can be convinced you shouldn't have this. This is worthless. There's cases where somebody thinks they have something unique and they don't. But that's just normal. Like Edison plastic cylinders. So that's a really good example. Like you'll go to a flea market and there'll be like a little stack of ancient Edison plastic cylinders, each one the size of a tiny juice can, that play some piece of music from like 1902. And you're like, oh my God, this is 117 years old. Here's the thing though. Edison made a lot of them.
Yeah. Like
millions and millions and millions and millions. So they're worth about $1 a piece because there's so many of them. Mm-hmm. They're like beach pebbles. But on the other hand, you'll get this weird situation where there's all these different magazine issues, but like there's a promo version that only got taken to 2 conventions. That one is rare and hard to find, and it would be a big deal to get it up. But the rest of them, millions.
Right.
And I think that's just the nature of these things. I'll say that I don't like to be the gatekeeper. If somebody comes to me with stuff, I don't say, well, who cares? I will say, how much disk space does this affect us? Is it bleeding or full of mold or on fire? Is there something wrong with it? But I'm not going to be the guy who tells them, nah, I don't like it. I don't understand it. You haven't made the use case. Because I'm the guy who has to make the use case all the time. So I think that if you find value in something, don't be surprised. Here's a really good example: vintage computers. There are certain brands of computers, and there's a lot of them. And people
Commodore 64, for example.
Yeah, like a stock 64. The fact is like for some of them, I mean, not to go off on this friggin' goat path, but I was not 100% a fan of the thing where they made the sound card that you ripped a SID chip out of a Commodore 64 to make it go. That
the
wasn't
hard SID, you mean? Yeah, the hard SID.
I get it. I mean, if that's going to be a controversy, that's a pretty good one. But I totally understand that there are some vintage computers that even though you look at them as valuable and incredibly precious because they're a part of you, on a pure physical way, a vintage computer group might say, yeah, look, please don't give us any more Commodore 64s. They might politely take a Commodore 64 in because the person made it a condition of taking the 300 floppies, but then they're going to turn around and they'll probably sell it.
Well, that's
because they'll use that money to fund storing of the other stuff.
Yeah, well, that comes to an exchange I had with like Bill Hurd, who designed the Commodore 128, and I had broken my 128, and I was, and I was trying to figure out how to fix the thing, and I happened to run into him at a computer festival, and I said, this thing, I kind of busted this, and what would you suggest? And he's like, get another one. We made millions of them. You know, suddenly I was like, yeah, you know, you're right. These things are just there's millions of them everywhere. It's not really that. On one level, it's like you don't want to get rid of it because, you know, it is vintage and there's a finite number, but there's a lot of them around.
But
Right,
there's
and
a
coming to
problem here.
terms.
There's a problem here, just because I want to take this. At least here in Germany, the 90s was a throwaway society.
Yeah.
So a lot of things were thrown away in the 90s here in Germany, especially Commodore 64 and old hardware, old computer, old software, old floppy disks. And some of such things became so rare that they are so expensive, secondhand on eBay or other places, you can barely afford them, because if people didn't throw them away in the 80s and 90s, they wouldn't be so rare nowadays. Right. And this is why I have a problem with it, to say just throw it away with millions of them, because there will be at some point a time where there won't be millions of them. Sure. And you wish you didn't throw that single Commodore 128 away.
Right, but the main question there is, will that time be 2021 or 2121?
Right.
Also, I totally get it, like in terms of what you're talking about, but I'm also talking about the fact that if you have people who day in day out deal with this stuff and they realize, like, we've got 50 of these, like, we don't need them anymore. Yeah. Other people should. They're not saying they should be destroyed, but they shouldn't be treated as if the archive needs to have them. Again, this is like a weird thing that comes out from dealing with this. People will say to me, like, hey, man, I've got these floppies. And here's the deal. With the Apple II, we'll image all your floppies. But as time is going on, we are hitting a point where like 90 to 97% of what a person gives us, we have definitively. But we're not telling people don't give them to us. We are just doing things in a way that we recognize, like, this is like let's try to come up with engineering to very quickly assess whether or not this one has been done before, and we're moving towards that. Like, it's obvious that our imaging software will eventually hit a registry, and we'll look at it and go, "I just looked this up. It's already out there. Don't take it." Like, that's obviously where it's headed. Right. But you only get to that point after having done thousands and thousands of these. Like, that's where we're headed. And this problem exists to varying degrees with, like, books and records. You know, there are records that look like they're common and they're not, and the opposite. That's mostly what I'm saying. But I never sight unseen refuse somebody's stuff on a pure, we probably have it. I just say to them, please realize we probably have a lot of this, and it will go somewhere else, but you will be rest assured it will find a home. Mm-hmm.
That's also important, yeah.
Yeah, so, like, I will do that. There are people and groups and stuff that want to have an ersatz archive. Like, they want to have a bunch of – this is happening more and more, especially in America, where, like, people are trying to set up these situations where they have a whole bunch of old software, like, right there, so that kids and people they're collaborating with can experience this stuff one-on-one. And it's not as important to them that it's a specific spreadsheet program or a educational title. Like, they're just happy to have vintage boxes because it's the actual experience of those boxes. And so they'll always have a use for these things. But we will have imaged them. We will have gone over them. We will have, so like any other discipline, once you go into it, you start to find out that the priorities are of a different type, and the outcome and the issues are weird ones, like not the ones you would have thought were the problems.
That's true.
Like,
That's true.
Oh man, you can't put Jumpman anywhere because one company cares about it, as opposed to, wow, it's actually super easy to emulate this one. Like, I can emulate really complicated consoles in the browser, but then I can't easily emulate, with the Commodore 64 specifically, Vice.js, and therefore Vice, has this weird thing where it will do, like, the person who did the compilation for our version of it, the JavaScript version, first of all, his thing, you could tell it to turn it off. But his default is as soon as it notices that it's reading from the disk drive, it turns off throttling of the emulator and just bangs through the recording as fast as possible so that it can start playing so you don't sit there for 3 minutes. Similarly, it has a setting for
True drive emulation.
for booting. Like it knows, like it automatically creates the 8N1.
Yeah.
Like it creates the load star because it knows like, oh, I have a disk in me. I am an emulator sitting in a browser. People are probably trying to boot this disk, so I will do that. Like that's a setting.
And I exactly know who you mean. It's Richard Janishek, because we also dealt with him when we had a Scene World and we wanted to have it live in our Commodore 64 version in the browser. And I think it's already like 5 years ago we did that. And at this time, the Vice.js was put on ice because he said nobody's interested in it, so I will not continue developing this project at all. And it was us that asked him if he could implement it, improve it, and insert stuff that we need, like 1581's emulation and support and stuff. And so it's interesting that now, thanks to us and thanks to archive.org, this Vice.js has a new purpose, and now suddenly it's used for something.
Yeah, I mean, just for the record, the vice person I dealt with was a completely different person, but he was
Interesting.
yeah, well, because he was a very specific person. I brought him in. He banged his head against it for 3 weeks and made it work.
It's a different Vice.js implementation. Okay, I thought there was only one.
Right. No, he took Vice.js and fixed it.
Ah.
No. All right, let's see. So the archive has something on the order of probably 15 to 20 platforms emulated, things like consoles and computers and handheld games and so on. And then we also built kind of a framework for taking any set of emulators. Originally, it was just MAME. But then we added, DOSBox and Vice and so on. And every time we do that, we have to kind of hook an emulator into our system. And it helps to compile it a certain way and function a certain way. We have to do all these little tricks. And what we discovered, what we do every once in a while, and this happens a lot, is I go, it's been a few months. What don't we emulate? Why not? And I go down a rat hole I probably went down a year earlier, but I'll do it. I'll be like, we don't emulate the Shaggy Dog 5000. Why don't we do that? Well, there's 3 emulators for the Shaggy Dog 5000. 2 of them are terrible. The third one could work, but we have to have someone do it. And in that, the grand winner of all that was the Commodore 64, where it was like, come on, we don't emulate the 64? That's crazy. What's out there? Well, here's 3 or 4 places. MAME doesn't emulate the Commodore 64 as good as it could. It's obvious all the good stuff is in Vice. People have been going crazy over Vice for 10 years. There's only one JavaScript implementation. It's super out of date. It super doesn't work. It has all these tricks. And finally, I had somebody come into one of our channels and go, hey, you don't do Vice for the, you have Vice.js. And I'm like, well, guess what you just volunteered for? and his name was SGO. And SGO spent 3 weeks, day in, day out, compiling it, finding errors, fixing problems. We upgraded it to the most recent version of Vice, but the most recent version of Vice did a bunch of stuff that didn't make any sense. Yeah. So we pulled it back, and then we implemented different things, and then he was using it. And once we got it working, he was like, it should really speed up when it's booting. Okay, well, now it does that. Okay, and maybe we should add this. Okay, let's do that. And we got it working. And once it started working, it had all those advantages that Vice has, which is, super obsessive emulation. And it worked. And took us forever to figure out which sound paradigm worked. Like it emulates sound 4 different ways. I love the fact that it supports multiple SID chips. It just makes me laugh. There's some game that does that. There's some game that came out that will use 2 SID chips at once. I love that kind of hackery. Like, for the 7 of you who did this, we've got music support. Like, what a great way to spend a weekend.
Yeah, I've got 2 in my 64.
Right, creating a version of your program that like 9 people.
Yeah.
And the IBM guys, the IBM scene guys, I'm thinking Trickster and that crew. They have a lot of stuff where they'll say, "Hey, you never heard the, Sound Crater 2000 plus E version of the soundtrack. Here it is." And the reason why that exists is because the Sound Crater people, at their own expense, sent somebody to Sierra or LucasArts and gave them an office, and they had to go make it work so it would work with the Sound Crater, so they wouldn't be bothering anybody. So that was like this weird little thing, and like nobody bought the card, and so nobody's ever heard the music because it was done by one guy on spec for these companies. So that's kind of a fascinating side thing to me, but the fact that the Vice emulator emulates all those insane things and lets you create these weird one-offs, I just love that stuff. So he got it working, and it's up there, and it emulates obviously the cassette tape as well as the drive. So as a result, beautiful, pretty accurate emulation. It runs pretty efficiently if you have a decently beefy box, and it will do a lot of the demos. And plus, of course, we can say PAL or NTC and react to that. And, so like it's got all the little pieces built into it. And I'm really impressed. I now live in an environment, or I should say a situation, where I'm more or less focused on like, now what? Now that we brought back from the dead all of these old programs, and I mean, a lot of these programs, a lot of these demos, the amount of effort required to get them up and running again interactively as opposed to a video usually overwhelmed the worthiness of sitting through them. Like, it's going to take me 3 minutes to put together all of the components and the configuration to get this 1 minute demo to run. Like, that was a problem. And I've taken that away at the archive. Like, here you go, press a button, don't have to install anything, it's just running, there you go. And what does that mean? Like, what does that mean now? And that question is still open to me. That's the thing I'm dealing with now, of like, what do people want? And I think what they want is they want really smart, curated museum guides to help them understand what they're looking at. Like, they really want some guy, preferably with a European accent, to explain to him, like, here's what you need to know about the silence. And like, now we get a walkthrough of the silence, and go here and you can play this thing the silence did. Now the silence were trying to achieve this and this because I've talked to them and this is what they were thinking. And like, I think people want that. They want like an overview with a cultural context.
Right.
And we leak over here to a very slight, very minor tangent, I will say, which is that I totally understand this, is that for the past X amount of years, I recognize pushback at an American chronicling the European demo scene. And there's just enough strong pushback, not from everybody, but enough that I know it would be a bad idea for me to be that guy. Just enough to go, they want it to be homegrown. They want it to be people who lived and breathed this community from their youth and went to these things, and want them to tell the story from their point of view. An American doing it, someone from Japan doing it, like, we'll do it like we're studying an alien race. We won't get it right. We'll describe the visuals well, and we'll describe what we're seeing, but we won't understand what drove people.
Martin, isn't that a task for you?
Oh well, I totally appreciate archiving, but I'm mostly too lazy for it.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, I mean, I thought the Mole Man documentary was very well done. You know, I thought that a lot of the stuff Hornet did actually, frankly, was pretty cool. Even though they were Americans, but I totally get it, and so I stay out.
Demoers.
Right. Well, I totally get it. I mean, I totally get it. And as a result, all I try to do is lay out a stage and a storage area where somebody who does that job can acquire them very easily and depend on us being available in the same way that scene.org and Puad and Slangpung and all the rest of them are available as, repositories out there for people to build these narratives. But those narratives need to be built soon because a lot of these guys lived unhealthily and they're now in their 50s and they're gonna disappear.
Mountain Dew and Cheetos is not good for you long term.
Not a lifetime of Cheetos for sure. Not Stroop waffles till dawn, but you absolutely. I think that's where things are headed. Is that we need those guides to be able to take things to a level where people understand what they're looking at, because it's not like beautiful stuff is beautiful, of course, right? I mean, everyone knows that. You know, you look at Agenda Circling Forth and you're like, this is a beautiful thing. You might not know that there was a controversy involving the use of, Vangelis music in it, and it may or may not matter to you, but it might matter to somebody else to go, this brings up a whole situation in there of like, what does it mean when you remix pop music into your demos, and what happens then with Timbaland, because once you realize this, you need this story. Like without that
Timberland,
person,
oh my god!
But without a person to drag all of those threads together, it just becomes a big pile of artifacts, and you don't know what you're looking at.
Yeah.
You can enjoy it. There's no question. You're not cheating yourself by just enjoying the demos. Like you pop them up on a screen, you see them, they're beautiful. But I know there's more to it. And I know there's people who have done so much base work, so much difficult work to gather all of these threads. And I want more of it to happen. And I will watch from here. And wherever disk space and bandwidth can help their cause, I will provide it through archive.org.
So that's one of our next tasks for Scene World. Organize a group of historians for the demo scene.
I mean, I think they're out there. I find it funny that I even have any kind of a beef with Garbage Truck, but Garbage Truck would be a really good example.
Oh yes,
of somebody,
I know Garbage Truck. Yeah.
If Garbage Truck was paired with somebody a little more driven in certain realms, that partnership would produce amazing things. And I think there are people who you would be surprised where, like, they have all the knowledge, but they find it very intimidating or very annoying to have to go, well, where do I even start with this? As opposed to somebody who's like, I am so good at acquiring and collating and writing, but I never went to a scene party. So you pair those people up and magic happens.
Yeah.
And, I've seen that happen.
Well, that is what we do at Scene World. We are 20 people from all over the world, and everybody has different areas, and that is why we are so widespread. And that brings me to another thought I had. Like, all the responsibility that archive.org had is mind-boggling. I mean, it's mind-blowing even. I mean, imagine all the responsibility that if archive.org goes down at some day, then all the saved books, movies, records, programs, it's all gone. Right. So I hope that will never happen.
I mean, I won't lay full credit to this, but sometime a few years ago, I created a project called internetarchive.bak, and it was a project to go, how could we back up the Internet Archive? And I know that Brewster on the inside was a little like, what's this guy doing? But it was mostly to come up with a mental exercise to go, what on the archive is convenient? Like, it's nice that we have it, but everyone has it. What stuff is unique? And what stuff is so precious and unique? And how do we back that up? And my personal estimate is there's about a petabyte, maybe 2 petabyte. This is outside of the web archiving, like outside of the Wayback Machine. Of terms of like the actual like items, like cultural items, there's about a petabyte to a petabyte and a half of like unique to the archive. Like we're really the place you get it at. And I would love to see that backed up. And so we used a whole system, and we made a prototype system that allowed people to do this, to have it be decentralized. And then like a few years later, that's when we started to see this whole DWeb, distributed web thing. And I'm fine with it. Like, I'm not like, oh no, my brilliant idea. It's more like, no, this is like an inevitable idea. We need to have this thing. It'll be uneven, undependable, and weird, but we need to have some contingency where it's not just a handful of machines owned by one nonprofit that maintain this one and only copy of this digital history.
Right.
Like, that's just a fact. And we're not going to ever pretend like, oh yeah, it needs to be locked down in our servers and our servers only.
Yeah.
Like that's a very unhealthy approach. And so my hope is more people will get involved.
So that brings me to my last bit on this, which is simply you hear a lot of people say that nothing that you put on the internet is ever gone. Like you upload something there, it's there forever. And we've seen that that's not necessarily true, Yeah. You did manage to back up GeoCities, at least. I don't know if you got all of GeoCities or if it's just
a portion.
Right. But there's other things such as, I think AOL Hometown, that's gone.
Right.
You got that too, by the way.
Did he? Did they?
We got portions of it. Again, It's always portions because we're on the outside taking photos.
Right.
We don't get to get into the servers.
Right. So there's lots of stuff like that, and this is stuff that I had space on both of them, and I used to use it to host images for a different site that I was doing stuff with. So I'm sure that most of that stuff is gone, but to that effect, how much stuff is really in danger of being lost forever?
Okay. So several things on that. First of all, obviously, one of the side effects of digital information is that its attribute is that once it's gone, it's super gone. And by that, I mean, like, once a hard drive stops, it's over. Mm-hmm. Like, that's very that's a level of brutality that a lot of other media don't share. VHS store goes out of business. The VHS tapes end up in someone's storage unit. 20 years later, someone buys everything in the storage unit and eBay. Suddenly it's back. Right. And things you didn't know existed on VHS are back. If those were hard drives, you might not get any of them back. So there's that attribute. When people say things are on the internet forever, what they usually mean is there's a certain family of things that are capable of living forever, usually in the form of memes or individual ideas. If there's a screenshot of somebody doing something embarrassing, like, because that's one JPEG image, it has a potential for easily being switched around. But the more complicated it gets, the more difficult it gets. So if it ends up being an interrelated website that does something, it gets harder and harder to bring it back. Over time, you will eventually lose it as it decays. That's the level of subtlety. I get it. Everything on the internet is forever. What they really mean is ideas, once they end up on the internet, tend to live on much longer than you would think. So it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. In terms of, like, a lot of the problem we encounter is, like, data that comes in, we don't always know its value at the moment that it's there. But if we don't take it now, we can't ever determine its value later if it disappears. And there's more and more of a move towards proprietary, non-shareable data, such that it becomes harder and harder to get your hands on it. Compare Usenet versus Facebook versus Mastodon versus a Mattermost instance. Like all of these individual places. Again, a chronicler might be able to derive a nice version of these things, but that's because somebody is living on it, doing this work day in, day out to keep it. But it doesn't just fall into easily exportable HTML and JavaScript files that will play forever. That's kind of like where we are now, this kind of paradox. So Facebook has rejected ever having an export function to any meaningful amount, and a lot of functionality is on Facebook. So that's like what you're running into. So the worst thing you get with Facebook is you're on Facebook. I try to be a good interviewee. I try to pull it back to scene issues. But like you put up a demo.
No,
like,
it doesn't have to be scene. We are fine with all topics.
Yeah, we're all over the place.
You put up a demo scene production on the thing, like, oh man, 20 years ago, this blew my mind when it came out. And then in the comments, people will tag some of the people who worked on it because they have Facebook accounts. And then that person will come in and weigh in with like, oh my God, do you know why this is like this? That's because it's a 2D sprite because we could not figure out 3D. Like the person will start dumping this unique insight, but it's all locked up in this one comment section in this one Facebook group. And it's not going to end up in any archive out there. And either somebody saves all that material, or it disappears in terms of no one will ever find it and it won't make the right connections. That's the kind of stuff that I worry about. But I mean, also part of that is because there's so many more people on the internet now that like the pure blast of, I mean, when you're watching, 200 people interact with each other in the BBS days, yeah, sure. Of course it's easy to keep track of now. But when it's, 2 billion people, I mean, we still have people on the earth who have never been on the internet, but that's changing rapidly. And, thousands of people are coming on for the first time every day. And so, the environment has changed, and trying to act like it is simply a big sheaf of papers you can photocopy is just not accurate. And it's pretty easy to pick on vintage computing platforms of the 80s and 90s because you're able to just say like, oh, this person owned 200 floppies. I can image those in 2 hours and done. Whereas now it's a lot more complicated. So I think that's kind of like the paradox of stuff on the internet is forever, except when it isn't, then it really isn't. And I think that's really the best way to put it.
That is actually why I wanted to make sure that archive.org has our interviews and our podcast, that if someday, iTunes, YouTube, and all those other stuff goes away, people can still find it
and
at
they
your
will.
place.
Someday it'll vanish because that's the nature of the internet. We saw MySpace disappear. We've seen Orkut. Yeah. Remember that Orkut nonsense?
That was famous in Brazil.
Yeah, that thing disappeared. Friendster is not even a thing people remember anymore. It's like this stuff doesn't last forever. Facebook and YouTube and Google and whatnot, they have fostered some extra longevity, but at some point, it's not going to exist in the form that we know it now, and there is a danger that things in comment sections, MySpace may have recovered data, images and stuff that people had on their pages, but the comments that people left them, do those ever exist anymore? Do the messages that you sent between, you and other people on MySpace years ago, do they exist? No, that's gone.
Well, they exist as copy in my email inbox because I always turned on notifications.
If you happen to do that, but a lot of people don't.
Maybe I have maybe too specific question, but when it comes back to the Wayback Machine and I visit the old websites, then I often figured out that some, for example, PNGs are missing, and they are just static asset. They are just like not like a full-fledged JavaScript page with this and that. Do you know why these PNGs are sometimes missing on old web pages? Where there's just like this hard disk that were broken, or maybe too specific a question. I don't know.
No. I think the thing is that There's a great line by Eric Allman, who did Send Mail, which is now mostly forgotten from people but for a long time it was the premier way that mail got transferred between different Unix computers. And he once described the technology as a sledgehammer designed to kill a fly that turned out to be an elephant in the distance. And it turns out that a lot of the Wayback is that same thing, that it was like an experimental, neat idea. And over time, the web has innovated into essentially an application platform. And we do our best to gather things up. But there are a lot of server-side and client-side manipulations going on now to essentially make, cross-platform applications that, like if you would have to have somebody, and this is entirely possible, by the way, going forward, you would have to have somebody essentially fake up using notes the experience of using Hipmunk or Kayak or one of these travel sites. Like in 10 or 15 years, you will have to use the scant data that you have and kind of recreate the feel of it, because there's just simply be no way to bring it back. It'll be gone. And there's a lot of other online experiences now that are depending utterly on a bunch of client-side and server-side experiences that we won't have. And we'll have to decide if we want to see them again. It's just not going to be possible to look at it. There's a bunch of experiences like that in other areas. Fluoroscopes are my go-to example. That was an X-ray machine for shoe salesmen in the 30s. Kept killing shoe salesmen, so they don't have it anymore. So you can't experience it, but it was a real thing. So what are you going to do? You're going to get a little video machine so that when you put your foot in, it fakes up a little, X-ray of your foot. What are you going to do? Because you can't get the old thing back. And that's part of why videos are an important part, screenshots of old websites. The Internet Archive now screenshots websites when we image them, just to have a reference material. You can't find that on the archive itself right now yet, but we are doing it. So when you archive a website, it says, and here is a snapshot of what Chrome thinks it looks like on this day, the day we grabbed it. So you can compare the two. How important that'll be, I don't know. I know we must have thousands of unique rule sets that we have programmed into the Wayback Machine over the course of the last 20 years to go, if you're looking at this between September 12th and September 17th in 2019, do the following 6 things to the image, because otherwise you can't look at it. I'm sure that's going on just to be able to make it play back. But that's just that's our nightmare. That's our bed. That's our bed of bugs. We live with it.
Yeah,
it's not as easy as press play and record and then later press play. It's just not that easy, and it never was.
I totally get the idea. I was also having a private project. It was just a simple WordPress site and just exported everything into static HTML to have somehow just a copy of it available without the risk of 0-day bugs on the server or whatnot, just to have a physical copy. And I just seen also how painful the process can be, just having just 250 megabyte of static HTML pages, and still some tiny details are missing though. So
sure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no. When you work at its scale, we're talking about there's actually billions and billions of URLs saved on the archive. So it's a person will say I can't believe you didn't do you seem to have really terrible playback of this 2004 website. And we'll be thanks for bringing it to our attention. We'll go look at it. But people are uploading CD-ROMs to the archive all the time, and I am automatically classifying them in a CD-ROM section, but I'm not looking at them, and they're coming in at the rate of maybe 10 or 12 a day of CD-ROM images of software. And some of them, people will go wow, they had this rare shareware program. They didn't know. And I'm no, we really didn't. You may be the first person looking at it. That's the story, buddy. I don't know what to tell you. So that's just that's the nature of this. I'm glad to be in a position where we are flooded and overwhelmed with the amount of interesting stuff coming in, as opposed to sitting around all day hoping this will be the week we get something interesting.
Yeah.
So it's a good life.
Thinking about this, maybe at some point I should ask you guys to make a collection for the video versions of our interviews at some point.
Sure.
In case YouTube goes down someday. Yeah.
There's a script out there called YouTube-DL.
Yeah.
And a program called TubeUp, TUBEUP, and it will mirror a YouTube channel on the archive. And what we do is we tend to make them not accessible. Like people will do it, but we make them not accessible unless you know the URL, because we're not trying to compete with somebody's live
Right.
YouTube. And then we will revisit them in the future, and if they are gone or lost, we'll bring them back up again.
So you are already mirroring our YouTube channel, but we didn't know about it.
We might be. We don't get everyone. We might be.
Well, check us out, because I wouldn't like to lose our YouTube videos.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, like, I mirrored all of Red Bull Academy because Red Bull Academy is going down, but Red Bull Academy has all these amazing interviews and lectures and things, and they just lost their funding. And so I've mirrored all of it, and they were happy. Like, they called me and they were like, "Oh, thanks for doing this."
Wow.
So I was like, "Yeah, okay."
Yeah, so where can people go to find out about everything that you're doing and everything that archive.org is doing and how they can contribute and help and everything?
Okay, so the main archive site is at archive.org. I'm at Text Files on Twitter. I also have textfiles.com. ASCII.textfiles.com is my blog. I have a podcast out there where I just talk about stories all day. The email, if you want to call me or write me, is jscott, JSCOTT, at archive.org if you've heard something and want more information. And I think that that should cover most of what people would look for. My DMs are open. I'm always up for discussing things. And I'll do my best to, get back to people as fast as I can. Obviously, I have dozens of things waiting for me on any given day, but I mean, I do my best to reach out to folks to give them,
sometimes
a happy ending to their stuff.
Sometimes you email to me within minutes.
Depends on the day. Depends on the context. The best thing to always think about is how much are you putting on the other person? Like, I'll get people who are like, "What can you tell me about the state of archiving today?" And I'll be like, "Oh, it's a book." So I'll put it aside because I want to get it right. And then a couple weeks go by. And then somebody else will be like, "Hey, do you guys have this online?" And I'll do a quick search. I'll be like, "Yep, here." Like, that's easy. That's a task. That's just email etiquette. I mean, people will send me stuff where I'm like, I feel like this guy is using me to write a dissertation. Like, I really do feel that. And then I'll be like, I'll write back to him like, "Is this for a dissertation?" He's like, "Well, yeah." And I'm like, "Oh, that's great."
No, we want to preserve history.
Yeah, and we will put links to everything that you've mentioned in the podcast description so that people can check that out when they're done listening or while they're listening to it right now.
Yep.
All right. So enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you for sitting with us.
All right. Talk later.
Lesson journey. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye. Oh, well, nice.
Okay. So that was... Oh, Joerg left.
Joerg left us alone.
Well, so
but
that
he's
was...
just recording.
Yeah, so that's fine. I'm still recording too. So that was Jason Scott. You can check him out at archive.org and also at textfiles.com and all the other links that he just said. For us, you know us. Joerg has already left, so it's just me and Martin hanging out here. We'll see you next time.